Well, let's go ahead and get started. It's about a minute past the hour. Thanks everybody for joining. I know many of you are hopping between meetings already, so appreciate you being with us. If you benefit from having closed captions, want to remind you that those are available, so you can click the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So welcome back to the second live session. We're going to be focusing on learning about the group. So again, my name's Sarah, my pronouns are she and her, and we have Olivia and Kayla joining us as well. So let's hop into an overview of what we're going to be looking at today. So last session and through our homework, we looked at ourselves as individuals. And so now we're going to be transitioning to look at the individuals who are within the groups that we're facilitating. And this part is a lot about good preparation and planning. It allows us the opportunity to anticipate issues that might come up, to plan a facilitation process that's going to help us engage and include folks and be successful. So by completing the prerequisites and participating in today's session, you're going to be able to define the types of power, describe the stages of group development, and compare appropriate facilitation strategies at each of those stages of development. So if you are finding that note catcher to be a helpful tool for you, we're on pages 2 and 3, and you're welcome to continue to use that after this session. So what we're going to focus on for today is we're going to continue to build our relationships with one another by engaging in a get to know you activity to start in breakout rooms. Then we're going to revisit our group agreements that we started last time before jumping into today's content, where we'll talk about the groups that you are facilitating or that you will be facilitating, and really looking at where power shows up in those groups. So Olivia is going to be leading us through that section of today's session. Then I'll come back on and talk about stages of group development, and we'll look at facilitation styles during those different stages of group development. All right, so first up, hopefully Rebecca, I see her connecting to audio, so hopefully that happens soon. We are going to head into a breakout room to start with, and this is another get to know you opportunity. So we think this one's kind of fun. We'll be in small groups, and once you are in your breakout group, we'd like everybody to spend the first minute finding something nearby. So an object that is near you that you can hold up to your camera, and that's something that tells the group something about you. So after everyone returns back to the screen, you'll take turns introducing yourself and sharing your item and what that tells about you. So each person will have about a minute to share. And Olivia, will you demo this for us?
Sure. So I always have a little pencil sharpener beside me because I'm one of those old school people that really likes a point on my pencil, and I take a lot of notes whether I use them or not. And so that's what you must know about me. And I get very annoyed when my 2 children remove my pencil sharpener because I definitely need it. So that's a little something about me.
Great. All right, any questions about our instructions for breakouts before we head in? Okay, take us away, Kayla. All right, we dragged you all back. Hopefully you got to learn something new or fun about a peer in the course. I'm now going to share with you the feedback that we received. So thanks for those of you who were able to do that post-session feedback. We're going to do that after each session. We're going to ask for feedback. Olivia and Kayla and I review that, and we'll then share back with you all what we heard, and we'll implement any feedback in real time that we're able to or at least keep it in mind for future courses if it's not something that we're able to implement during the course. So what we heard was positive feedback, which is always nice to hear, as well as a request to get to know the other members of the course more. So thank you for that. And we'll continue to try and find opportunities for you all to connect with each other through icebreakers like the one we just did and other breakout room discussions. So whenever you find yourself in a breakout room, do take a minute to just go around and say names and organization that you're with so that you all can get to know each other and can connect some dots with faces and discussion board posts. Also want to encourage folks to feel free to reach out to specific individuals that they made a comment in the live session or posted something on the discussion board that you want to talk with them more about or connect about. Do feel free to trade email addresses or phone numbers so that you can connect beyond the live sessions in the course. So we'll always be looking at the feedback and we'll try and proactively incorporate anything that we can into future sessions. So if there's anything that's not working for you, please let us know so that we can try and address it. And what we're trying to do here is also model the process of collecting and reviewing, sharing, and implementing feedback, because this is something that you all can do also in your meetings or coalitions, which really is another opportunity to be responsive to the group's. So let's take a look at the group agreements that we brainstormed individually last session. Then we talked about them as the whole group. Olivia helped us capture those on a Padlet, and this is a summary of what we came up with. So we talked about setting aside distractions while we understand that life happens, offering respect to all, being kind to others, which includes considering different experiences or hardships that folks may be coming with, being open to new ideas and asking questions, providing encouragement to each other and positive feedback. So whether that's nods or emojis that we're offering if we're off camera, letting folks know that we agreed with what they said or that we appreciate them being honest through the chat or through some verbal feedback. That as facilitators, Olivia and I will warn you if we're going to call on people. We're going to offer grace in facilitation practice. So as your facilitators for this course, I know that Olivia and I certainly appreciate that and want to make sure that we're extending that to all of you as well. And we want to keep this as a confidential or safe space to share and assume best intentions for all in the group. So take a look at those for another second, and then I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all of your faces and make sure that we have agreements on these, or if we need to have some further discussion about any of those, that we can do that. All right, so anybody have any additions to the list that they want to add? Right. Any questions or clarification that folks need from our list? Okay, if you could please use your actual thumb or your emoji thumb to let us know that you're good with using those group agreements for our time together in this course. And go ahead and keep it up because it takes me a minute to span around the screen. I'm seeing most folks. Francis, if I can hear or see from you along with Rebecca. Perfect. Thanks you so much. Excellent. So let's continue our work together as Olivia talks about individuals functioning inside the groups.
Great. Thank you. And good morning here from Denver. I'm excited to be here with you again. I love this session because, first of all, it's always great discussion, but after looking at the discussion board, I know it's going to be great because you all have such amazing case studies that we can talk about today. So I'm excited about this. So last session and through our homework last time, it was all about ourselves. Who am I as a facilitator? And now we're going to be thinking about our group, and that really helps us with preparation and planning. Even Sarah and I and Kayla met before this session to say, okay, we've got some learners on this end of the spectrum, some learners on this end of the spectrum, who all's going to be here? What's the best way to come together? It doesn't matter how small or how big your group is. It's really important to consider who is going to be there. When we think about who's going to be there, we can anticipate potential issues or potential opportunities, as we like to say. We're able to structure goals and identify outcomes that are relevant for the members of the group. And we can think through strengths and expertise that is in the group. And then we can design a process that's going to be most successful for our group meeting. So that's why we really want to come in that place of saying, who is our group? I'm going to share my screen and then give you an opportunity to be thinking about your group. All right, so participate with me here. If you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes, and you can turn your camera on or off, however you prefer. We're going to do some visualization here. So picture the group that you're working with, that you are facilitating, or maybe that you have been assigned to facilitate in the very near future. Let's think about that group. Think about the individuals who are part of that group. Who are they? Who's sitting at that actual table? Or maybe they're sitting in a Zoom room and you're looking at them on the screen. Who's there? Are they representing themselves? Are they there just representing an organization, as part of an organization? What do you think might be important to them? Think of these individuals. If you were to ask them, why are you here? Why did you come to this meeting? What do you think they might say? What do you want to get out of this meeting? What do you think they might say? Okay, you can open your eyes. So when we ask ourselves these questions, you can see our old school radio there. We're tuning our radio station to WIIFM. What's in it for me? Or what's in it for them? What is in it for the people that are in your meeting? So you may already know some of this information. Some of you may have done some background knowledge. Maybe you're an outside facilitator, so the organization itself gave you inside info into who these people are and what's in it for them. Maybe you're making educated guesses. That's what many of us do, and you're not really sure, but you're making a guess. Or maybe you asked them this. Maybe you've already kind of gone through this process and asked them. It's really important, I think, to have that mindset of saying, what's in it for them? What's in it for me? Because we've all been to those meetings where we weren't exactly sure why we showed up, but we sure want it to be useful for our time. So this is a great way to prep and be thinking of that. So if you want to take a second to jot down some notes in box 2 of session 2 on your note catcher, who's in your group? What's in it for them? Why are they there? So that's going to set our mindset for this. So as part of your homework, you watched a short video about the bases of power as defined by French and Raven. It was presented by Dwanita Mosby Tyler. If you haven't had a chance to look up much about Dwanita, I really encourage you to. She's an amazing leader, has excellent skills in facilitation and in training, and actually has a wonderful story about how recently she took back her given name of Dwanita after going by Nita for many years. It's a pretty powerful story. So I definitely think even outside of this course, you would find her information very fascinating. So we're going to go through some of these examples of power. Some of them are a little more obvious. So reward and power are pretty easy to understand. If someone has that power to give or to take away, that's pretty easy to understand. And the other one that I thought maybe we wouldn't necessarily need to discuss as much is legitimate power. The power you get from having a title or a position, the title of CEO or the position of I'm the mom. So that's that type of power. But now we are going to discuss a couple of other ones: expert, referent, and informational. I'm going to stop share so we can all see each other and chat a little bit about this. All right, thank you, Sarah. So in the chat, Sarah reminded us reward and coercive power to give or take away, legitimate power from position or title. Now we're moving into expert power. Can I hear an example, either verbally if you want to come off mute, or in the chat, of what you think expert power might represent? An example of expert power.
Someone who has like a lot of knowledge about the topic or about the program or something like that. So just has the knowledge, and maybe more so than others in the group.
Excellent, Helen. Expertise. Phoebe says familiarity with something based on education, training, or lived experience. I'm glad you bring that up, because we have that traditional expert power of maybe someone with a PhD. And then we have the non-traditional, which is maybe a third generation resident of a neighborhood who knows all about this from lived experience. Vincent says knowledge. Someone in the org that you go to for information because you know they will have the answer. So expert power. These are great examples. All right, you kind of led us, Erica, into this next one. Can I get some examples of informational power? What is an example of informational power? And maybe some new folks can share if you have ideas.
Someone that has a lot of information on something, so they have a power because other people may not have access or knowledge to this information.
Mm-hmm. Excellent example, Francis.
I think for me, information is based on experience.
Great. So more experience, more information on the topic. Someone who has certain important information that others don't. So yes, some people can control things because maybe they do have information that others are not, do not have access to. Any other examples?
I was thinking this could also be like someone who's lived for a long time, you know, like a grandmother who just seems very wise and has a lot of that, maybe.
Yes, thank you for that example. Also, when we think about maybe an example might be budget, access to the budget, you know, people that hold a certain amount of power because of certain information that they have in our organization. Okay, let's go to the next one, referent power. And I'll just remind you, it's the ability to convey a sense of personal acceptance or approval. It's held by people with charisma, integrity, and other positive qualities. People with high referent power can highly influence anyone who admires and respects them. Can anyone think of an example of referent power in your circles? I think there were some examples in the discussion board. A mentor-mentee relationship in work or outside of work. Excellent example. Thank you, Tiffany. Any others that come to mind? Ability for a leader to influence an employee through that referent power. Mm-hmm.
Teacher, student.
Teacher to student. Mm-hmm. And one that wasn't covered in the video, real quick, I'll look at Helen's, a staff person who has been at the organization or institution for many years and has seniority, and that people tend to like and have positive qualities. I might add too, that's something that sometimes adds to that. Thank you, Helen, for that example, supervisor-trainee relationship. Okay, so now one that wasn't covered in the video is social power. The ability of a person to influence the beliefs or actions of another person. What's an example maybe of social power in today's world? Does anybody involve themselves with social media at all? I think there are some social influencers on social media that we ourselves probably follow and think have some power because of their information or their ability to entertain or provide information. Certainly true of the generation below me, but yes, peers in a network, social influence, yes. So an example last night of power that I'll just share briefly, I led about 32 people in a PTSO meeting, which is the Parent Teacher Student Organization. And as I was prepping, I was thinking of the people who would be in the room and the power in the room. Things like the principal and the teachers have a certain amount of power. The parents, because we control what our students really do at home. There was a student there and they had an amount of power over our behavior because we're a bunch of adults, but there's a student in the room. We're going to behave differently. And there was a parent there that we know donated a lot of money last year for our direct give. And we really wanted to have a great meeting so that this person feels compelled to continue to support our school financially. So those were things as I was prepping for that meeting, I thought, wow, this is pretty obvious that I've got some interesting work to do to have this meeting handled well. I know you all have your own examples. We read a bunch in the discussion board, and now we're going to get a chance to think of this in some breakout rooms. I'm going to go ahead and share screen again so that I can give you the details. Okay, so we're going to think about this power piece in the context of our group dynamics. We're going to break up into small groups to discuss how these types of power show up in your groups that you might be facilitating. So that group that you visualized just a few minutes ago, let's think about power in that group. So we want you to describe one type of power you see showing up in your group. What does it look like? How does it show up? What impact does it have on the group or the other group members? Keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a negative impact. There's positive power. There's also negative impacts of this power. Identify somebody in your group who has a helpful example, and you're going to get to share back in a large group. You're going to have 12 minutes in your group, I believe. Kayla can update me if that's changed, and make sure we're ready to share when you come back. So I'm going to ask, are there any questions about this breakout activity before we head that way? If you're taking notes, this activity corresponds with box 3 on your note catcher. So you can definitely be doing that in the same time. And if there are no other questions, we will head that way. And Kayla did put the instructions in the breakout rooms or in the chat. So that will follow you to your breakout room. We're excited to hear the examples you have to share. Welcome back, everyone. Just a warning, I'm going to be asking for some examples. That was a part of our agreement, is that you wanted to give fair warning. I'm going to ask for an example from group 1 and group 3. Group 1 had Erica, Fu, Tiffany, and Vincent. And group 3 had Helen, Karen, Phoebe, and Natalie. So just a little fair warning. So anyone from group 1 have an example to share about your power dynamics discussion?
I can go. So, Vince and I have similar roles at we have the same role for different parts of the state health department in New York State. And it's not really an ongoing coalition, but there's a meeting that I'm involved in on an ongoing basis between a county health department and a state health department, just to sort of for the state staff to take on some of the morbidity from the county because they're short-staffed. And so, it's interesting because we both bring legitimate power to the table. but also, as Vince pointed out, there's a lot of referent power. I think we have a common goal. We're just trying to find the best way to address the morbidity, make sure that people are healthy, make sure people are getting the treatment that they need. So I think with that common goal and that referent power, we're able to really move forward. But in our group discussion, we also noted that really the dynamics and the types of power that come into a group really impact the outcomes of that group and how you're able to proceed forward. So if you have, maybe a not as good a balance of power or, some coercive power, it might lead to different outcomes. You might not be able to be as successful moving forward. Anybody else have anything to add from group one?
That was really well said, Erica.
Thanks, Vince.
I don't have much to add to that. That pretty much covered it.
Well, thank you for sharing, Erica. I think even as we just talk about county and state groups together, there's some power dynamics there that could be mentioned as well. But thank you for that example. All right, moving on to group 3. Anyone from that group? Again, Helen, Karen, Phoebe, Natalie, anyone have an example to share?
I can share my example and then we'll welcome others to chime in. But Erica made a great point about sort of the different power dynamics really decide what work is able to move forward. I feel like was a big part of my example that I gave. So I talked about referent power and how in the group that I am currently working with and had in mind when I was thinking about this, it happens bi-weekly. And so sometimes we have a larger group that has like director level individuals there, as well as the program staff who I work really closely with. And having the sort of higher ups present sometimes has a positive effect and then sometimes has a negative effect, because I feel like in times when they're present, it's a lot of deferring to them to get their opinions, their feedback. And it's like the program staff really takes a step back. Whereas if it's just them talking with me and my team, usually, we're able to make decisions a lot quicker and move things along. So I think it can definitely, but on the other side of that, it can really slow us down when they're not present, because their program team needs to take it back to them, get their feedback and opinions before we really make decisions as a whole group. So both sides of that. And yeah, so that was sort of my example that I gave, really just that dynamic when we have the higher ups, the director level present, and then when they're not there and it's just more program staff.
Great example, Helen. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'll open it up. Any other? We have time for one more example.
I'll chime in for a moment. Hi, everyone. This is Donnie, and I'm calling in. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I don't recall what group number I'm in, but one of the things that came through all of our examples is oftentimes people hold multiple types of power. So, and one thing that I was kind of recalling is across lots of different types of meetings and committees, oftentimes when somebody is holding like legitimate power, expert power, informational power, but if maybe there's a little bit lacking kind of within like referent power, for example, it can unintentionally dissuade people from engaging and like participating fully and authentically. So, and even if it's unintentional, like then you have to end up putting a lot more time and energy into trying to make an environment where people feel like there's trust there, that their opinions and contributions are going to be valued and validated. So that was just a few things that we were talking about in our group.
Excellent example. And we're going to get a chance a little bit later to talk about some of those scenarios and how, as a facilitator, how we might prepare or think about some of those things. So I really appreciate you bringing up that example and all those before. Thank you for that. Okay, some of you may have completed the optional oppression and privilege self-assessment, which was in your Canvas homework. It was optional. I do suggest that you do it. If you haven't, it's really eye-opening, talking about what kinds of power you might hold in different situations and why it's important really to think about that. So that's something just to throw out there to go back into Canvas and take a look at that if you haven't already. So we've talked about individual groups or people in your group. Now we're going to transition into talking about your group as a whole and what stage they might be in and how power might really impact that. So we've got a lot to cover, and Sarah's going to get us started. You are on mute, Sarah. And that happens.
Sure does. Thanks, everybody. Fun to hear those examples. So just as Olivia mentioned, we're going to transition to thinking about the group as a whole. So another part of your homework was to review Tuckman's stages of group development, both the cheat sheet, the video, and then to post in the discussion thread, which those were really interesting to read. And I'm just going to do a quick review of the stages. So these stages of group development are from research that was conducted by Bruce Tuckman and Marianne Jensen. And although the research is fairly old, it was done many years ago, it's still the most recognized group development framework that's been used internationally for more than 50 years. So it offers us this framework to think about as we facilitate groups. So the 5 stages: forming, norming, storming, performing, and adjourning. This image, I think, is a better representation than Tuckman's original model, which laid out everything sequentially. So the cycle, I think, shows a little bit more how groups can kind of go back and forth into different stages. So not all groups go through the stages in this order, and some of you were talking about that in the discussion post. And sometimes a group will need to reform for a different set of deliverables or outcomes, or because they have new folks entering the group. So the amount of time you spend in each stage is going to depend on the dynamics of the group, what the group is working on, time constraints, and other factors. So if we look at the forming stage, it's our first stage, and there are 3 main times when a group enters this stage. So when a group convenes for the first time, they're forming. When new members join the group, the group can stay in a forming stage. And I think sometimes, especially with community engagement work or coalition work, it may tend to feel like we're always in the forming stage because we have new folks coming in all the time. And then the third scenario is when a new facilitator joins an existing group. So by show of hands, how many of you have been in that situation where you are a new facilitator joining an existing group? Okay, Fu and Madison, Heather, Tiffany. Okay, so several of you, probably about half the group. So would you say that your group, any of you who raised your hand, is your group in the forming stage because of you being a new facilitator? Do you feel like that has taken the group to the forming stage? Tiffany, you're nodding your head. You want to take yourself off mute? And I didn't warn you that I was going to do that. Sorry.
It's okay. I do think that's the case. I mean, I just think, and I spoke to this in the discussion post, but it's kind of a vulnerable time, I think, when a new facilitator takes over, because you don't know the flow or the dynamic, or people might not recognize you as a resource or someone who should be facilitating, and it takes a little time to kind of earn your place and either maintain the dynamic that started or start a new dynamic that you bring to the table. And so in my post, I mentioned the Oral Health Coalition, and it was started before COVID, and then it stopped, and then our dental hygienist started kind of getting it going, and it was 2 meetings, and then they left, and now I'm covering once until our new hygienist starts. And so it's kind of stressful. I feel like we could really lose the group. So I want to work hard to maintain it, but it's hard when you have those components changing instead of one clear, strong, identified leader. And I know we're getting there. I think our new person will be able to do that really well, but kind of maintaining interest and trust in the process moving forward in all this transition makes me kind of feel like we're we're at the forming.
Yeah. So Valerie is saying this resonates for her. And I really appreciate the word that you chose to use about vulnerable stage, that the forming stage can be vulnerable. And there is this group going to work? Are we going to figure this out or not? So thanks for sharing that. So for those of you who raised your hand, you should know that your group was in a forming stage. You should know that generally group members in this stage are concerned about inclusion and whether or not they belong in this group. Is this the right place for them to be? Do they have something to contribute to this group? How safe is it for them to bring their whole selves or to participate in the group? Group members tend to be fairly polite during this stage. There's fairly low conflict, kind of some superficial discussion. And the group, just as Tiffany mentioned, is often looking to the facilitator for some strong direction during this initial stage. Groups in the forming stage tend to actively avoid controversy, which means they may avoid taking on serious topics or talking about feelings. And group members may tend to be kind of shy and hold back until they know each other a little more. So their comments may be a little bit more guarded. So in order for a group to transition from this stage to the next stage, each group member has to feel comfortable exploring topics that may be risky or pose some potential conflict. So that second stage is storming. You thought everything was going just fine. People were being nice and polite to each other. And then all of a sudden, we've got lots of consternation in the group. So this is when you see competition or conflict arise in the group. This is where lots of power dynamics can show up as folks may be concerned about control or power or influence. Which often manifests around disagreements about the process. There are often emotional responses to tasks and possibly challenges to the facilitator during this stage. So because of the discomfort that this stage can generate, there are some members who remain completely silent because they are not comfortable engaging in conflict or in a disagreement, while you may see others begin to dominate more. So it's also important to realize that not every instance of disagreement or conflict is an indication of storming. So we can certainly have healthy conflict that occurs at every stage of group development. In order to progress out of the storming stage, which isn't a necessarily productive stage, into norming, the group members need to move beyond the testing and the proving and the individual priorities mentality into a group problem solving mentality. So one of the most important traits that helps groups move from storming to norming is the ability to listen and truly hear what other group members are saying. So in that norming stage, it's a transitional stage where we're moving from storming to performing. So norming is we have moved toward greater cohesion, moving towards greater interdependence, where we are recognizing the value and voices of others in the group. We're willing to hear what others have to say and change our minds and maybe change some preconceived ideas or opinions that we have come in with based on the facts that are presented by other members. We ask questions of other members in the group, so we're looking to explore, we're open to hearing and maybe changing minds. Leadership at this point often becomes more shared. Subgroups or cliques that may have been part of the group tend to dissolve. And individually, group members are focused on building a sense of belonging in the group. And I have forgotten who said, I think maybe Erica, it was you when you were sharing your example of that this group that had both county and state folks, everybody had a shared mission, a shared goal, and that was pretty collectively identified. And so that's a key part of the norming stage. So group members are acknowledging other members' contributions. And unlike the forming stage, we've moved past the I just want to feel good, and we're willing to get into some brainstorming and start talking about action. So action really categorizes and characterizes the fourth stage, which is performing. So we are now working collaboratively. We're highly productive as a group. And at this stage is where you see work groups and subgroups really be able to work very independently. or individual organizations work independently, but still for the collective good of the greater group. So to an outsider looking at a group functioning in the performing stage, it might appear that the group is just purely task focused. But the reason the group is able to be productive and task focused is because that there's already those underpinnings of trust and respect, shared norms, the overarching goals. So they've gone through those other stages in order to get to this performing stage. So overall goal here is productivity through problem solving and work. And then to get to the next stage, the group needs to complete at least some segment of the work that they were working on. So the fifth and final stage wasn't actually included in the original version of this from Tuckman, and it was Marianne Jensen who added this years later. Adjourning is a planned conclusion to the activity. So it could be a conclusion of the group as a whole. It could be a conclusion of one particular task of the group. So it's an opportunity to recognize participation and accomplishments, for members to say goodbye, to celebrate all the good work that's been done. And I will say this is probably the most overlooked stage, that we often skip straight from adjourning to let's take on the next thing. So I want to pause here and ask if there were any questions that came up either as I was just talking through those or as you were hearing about the stages in your homework or the video that you looked at. Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute quick refresh break. We're going to come back at 6 past the hour. So enjoy your break and we'll see you in 5 minutes. All right. We've dragged everyone back. So what we're going to do next is use the annotate feature. And so I just want to review how to do that. Up at the top of your Zoom screen where it says you're viewing my screen in green, you can click on View Options. That'll bring a drop-down menu. You can click Annotate and then select Stamp Feature. And then I'll let you know which stamp to use. So just want to let you know those instructions as we go through. Pull up the chat here. Okay, thanks. I saw your note, Heather. This is one of the most complicated parts of breakout rooms is finding the right page to be on. So, all right. So let's look at the answer key to the Jamboard activity. And so hopefully, as you look through this, you see things that were similar to what your group came up with. This is box number 4 on the note catcher. So forming, we are looking about structures and strategies that help participants feel safe, legitimized, valued. There were lots of discussion in our thread about drawing the group back to this stage. About storming. So storming, we're looking for a facilitator to help name some of the issues that they see. Good to be reminded in this time as a facilitator that it's likely not about you, that you're not necessarily the target, even though you may be receiving some of the conflict. In norming, we're receiving feedback is a key role for the facilitator, guiding the group through expressing those differences and moving to that collaborative negotiation and problem solving, and then performing, formatting the work in a way that's going to be most effective and useful for the group, and then adjourning. So what I'd like us to do now is to use our annotation tool. So think back to the, there we go, that's what I want. So I'd like you to think about where it's helpful to have a directive style of facilitation. And go ahead and click along that spectrum with the green check mark for where you feel like which stage might be most helpful to have a directive style. And just a reminder, directive facilitation, the facilitator takes responsibility, guides the group, directs action, takes control through difficult issues. All right, so lots of check marks in our early stages of forming and storming. So can someone come off of mute and share why you feel like a directive style of facilitation would be helpful in some of those early stages of group development?
It keeps your group on task. So if you are trying to move a meeting along, that can be a good method, but I think it's also important for involving for the forming when you're first starting, because you want to get the group involved.
Yeah. Okay, great. Someone felt like directive style would be helpful in the performing stage too. You willing to share more?
That was actually me in group 3 that wrote in group 10 box. But I thought that when you're performing and things are going smoothly, it's good for those action items to be kind of direct and get things accomplished quickly.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And this is a great time for me to remind you that there are no right or wrong answers to this. So you could make a case for a lot of different things. So let's switch over to our red heart stamp and tell us where on the spectrum you feel like an involving facilitation style would be helpful. So this is when the tendency is to share leadership and facilitation responsibilities, keeping your opinion as the facilitator out of the discussion and activity. All right, great. So we're seeing involving showing up in lots of different places. And Heather, I think you gave us a nice example of why involving is also important in that forming stage. If you're purely directive, you might risk losing some interest or engagement from folks. So making sure that you're taking the time to involve and share leadership at the beginning will make sure it's not the facilitator who does all of the action items, right? All right, let's switch over to the yellow star. Content focus. So facilitation where we're really focused on the outcomes that the group produces. Where do you feel like the content facilitation style or facilitation focus might be most helpful? All right, lots of stars clustering around performing. Yeah, would love to hear somebody come off who chose, oh, my dog's gonna bark here. All kinds of excitement. Somebody who chose forming, why did you feel like a content focused or content focus for facilitation would be helpful in the forming stage?
I guess I put that there because I think in the beginning, helpful to remind people of the mission of the convening, or, why you're there in the first place, what the goal is, so you can stay on track.
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. All right, our last color here, blue arrow for process focused. So process focus is focusing on the function of the group more so than the outcomes of the group. Where do we feel like having a process focus would be helpful? So you could really make the case that we need to pay attention to the process all the way through the different stages of group development. Why do we feel like it might be especially important in the storming stage?
I think that's because you could use that opportunity to resolve your conflicts and work out any kinks that are being made known.
Yeah. Great example, Rebecca. So in that storming stage, in order for us to successfully move on to norming, we need to be able to figure out how to function as a group. So having the facilitation style focused on the process of the group would be really helpful in there. Excellent. All right. So this is good to keep in mind, not just because it helps you as a facilitator think back to what your individual focus and style were as a facilitator and think about, well, where might I be most comfortable? But to also think about when would it be most helpful for me to bring in a co-facilitator? Or when will I really need to be intentional about planning the meeting because this isn't my natural style of how to do this. So I'm going to need to be really thoughtful going into this particular meeting based on the stage of the group development. So would love to have folks drop into the chat the stage that you personally feel most comfortable facilitating. Performing. Thanks, Tiffany. I might be with you on the performing. Donnie's there too. Heather and Francis, or Heather likes the norming, Francis forming. Norming, performing. So I'm about to call on a couple of you to hear more. So Natalie, what is it about the forming or performing stages that you feel most comfortable with as a facilitator?
I think that in the forming stage, it's kind of nice to be able to, I don't know, put down some ground rules, be a little bit more directive in terms of the style. And then for the performing stage, I think it's just nice to feel like the group is effective and you can kind of take a step back as well.
Thanks. Sue, can we hear from you about what is it about the performing stage that you like facilitating?
During that stage, I feel like there are processes in line that we know that if it's not working, then we can change it, or if something is working, then we can keep going. And I like to have processes and things in place, so I feel very comfortable in that space.
Yeah, love it. Thanks. And Karen, I love that you put adjourning. People rarely put adjourning. What do you like about the adjourning stage?
I like to just recognize the people's, what they accomplished at the end results. And I also like to give people acknowledgement of helping me out and things like that.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So I'm going to pass it back over to Olivia to continue our discussion on the stages of group development.
Excellent. Thumbs up. Can you hear me with the headset? Okay, great. Sorry, I had to make a little change up. Great. I also like an end of year party, Karen. So yes, the adjourning is kind of nice. Okay, so as we come into this last half an hour of our session, we're going to put it all together, the stages, the power, the facilitation styles, and have some examples to share and to discuss, because we heard from you in the discussion board. People are like, let's talk about some real examples, and can you answer this? And I feel like we're going to get a chance to really dive in here. So keep in mind box 5 of your note catcher if you're taking notes on this particular portion. And this is just a reminder on the screen of the stages and then the different types of power. So take a look at that. And then I'm going to stop share and give you some examples that we're going to work through as a group. Okay, the first one, put your head in a place that you are in a storming stage with your group. And we're going to talk about how power might show up in this group. And later we're going to connect it to some facilitation strategies. So be thinking of that forward thinking. But for now, we're in the storming stage. How might reward or coercive power show up in a storming stage? You can use chat or come off of mute. Sorry, there's something loud going on outside, so I apologize if you could hear that through my headset. So reward or coercive power showing up in the storming stage. Rewards could incentivize people to participate more. I like that positive energy you put on that power. Another thing to consider might be people using power for individual gain. So trying to convince people of their perspective or their idea. So that's how reward and coercive might show up. Let's try another one. We're still in storming. What about legitimate power? How will that show up in the storming stage?
I think one interesting thought is, what happens when it's the facilitator who has the legitimate power? Yeah. What that can do to decisions made.
That is a great twist to put on that as well, because you're right, we all come with our own power as well, and how might that affect the storming stage? Legitimate power can set direction and set agenda. Another thing that I have written here is that legitimate power may not acknowledge the value of those with referent power, or vice versa. So we've mentioned some positive, some negative, and some, what will happen if that shows up? How about our final throwing out in storming stage? What about expert power? And think about the different types of expertise, but how might that show up in a storming stage?
Maybe people with more experience or knowledge on the subject might be like not wanting to hear other people's opinions, or just taking over the conversation because they think they know best.
Great
And
example. Thank you for
the
sharing.
positive side of that, they may be able to provide maybe some like historical context of where this group has come from. Just, I guess, to maybe just provide more expertise and information.
Madison says individuals with expert power may be looked upon during the storming phase for input or suggestions. Donnie says experts may be able to identify the root of the issues that are being identified. Tell me more, Vincent, about your comment in the chat.
I'm not sure why I typed it, but I just feel like the more expertise one has in a particular area, but I think it has to be with showing respect at the same time. Like, you may come with all this knowledge, but at the same time, it's the way you convey the knowledge that may help grow some referent power within the group for different parties. I hope I'm explaining that right.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Thank you for taking it a step further. I appreciate that. So these are all great examples. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how our facilitation styles may work in this stage of the group, in this storming. So now I want to hear, we just talked about a couple of things that might come up in terms of power. How might you handle some of those examples as a facilitator? Are there any strategies that come to mind that we've already talked about earlier in this session that you might use? So again, we're thinking about our storming stage. We're thinking about those different types of power, for negative, for positive, for however we think about it. And what are some facilitation strategies you might use in that stage?
So I wonder if we could focus on the example that Madison threw out about expert those with expert power maybe being able to help a group during the storming stage, move through that stage. As a facilitator, what would you do to help make that happen?
I'm wondering if it would be like part of it would be trying to engage those individuals with that expert power and maybe asking for their feedback or contributions.
And doing that even outside of the meeting or ahead of the meeting or something, asking them to speak up.
Excellent. Wonderful planning and preparation for what you think may occur or what needs to occur. Reflection may be one technique. Vincent, I love this, listening to others' concerns. When I think of this technique, I also think of providing that kind of reflection opportunity for the group so that they can be thinking about their power in the group and what that brings to that stage, opening some eyes to what may be going on. So thank you for that example. I think someone else mentioned it, but really naming what you're observing as a facilitator, using some of that directive to say, this is what we're seeing. This is why we're in this storming phase. What's going to help us move forward? Here's what I'm observing and some ways that maybe we can get through that as a group. Any other examples of facilitation strategies?
Olivia, can I jump in and go back
Please.
to what Gerald was saying in the chat and what Phoebe brought up about
Yes.
what if, as the facilitator, you have some legitimate power, and how, as a facilitator, might you recognize that and diffuse that a little bit in terms of the fact that you have the power to set the agenda, and perhaps guide and perhaps make decisions for the group. In a storming stage, what would it be important for you to do as a facilitator?
I can try to give some feedback on that, Sarah. I think one thing to do would be to say that even though I'm facilitating this, I'm not trying to make all the decisions right now. As a group, I can hear that we've got some different ideas coming forward and there's some concerns being expressed. Please try to get this all out so that we can all be aware of what the different concerns and ideas are. And then we're going to decide how we're going to move forward.
I think several of us want to just bottle you up, Gerald, and pop you out at the next tense meeting.
This is true. Tiffany says involving, shifting the power to the group. One way I can think of that is possibly through different types of activities, different ways of sharing. So maybe having a round robin discussion, or maybe we need small group discussion, not always the large group. Maybe we need individual discussions before the meeting. So really making sure that we're allowing opportunity for the group to show their power and not just me as a facilitator with that legitimate power. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing that up. Are there any other thoughts about that specific example? All right, I think we have time for one more little group think. So now let's think about people using their power in the performing stage. So we're now in the performing stage. And tell me a little bit, or our group, a little bit about how power might show up in that performing stage. And I think of it as rather a positive opportunity for power. Do any examples come to mind?
Olivia, I see it as a chance. I see the legitimate power and the expert power coming in big here for me. This is what I do, it seems daily. Just the coaching, the ability to coach and then give feedback, whether it's real positive regarding somebody's performance or whether there's some improvement that's needed in a particular area. And then again, the way you your approach to conversation.
Excellent. I think Erica says it well.
I hope you heard that. I'm having a little connection issue.
Yes. No, we heard it just fine. Thank you. And Erica mentions expert power as everyone has the opportunity to bring their expertise to the table during that performing stage. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah put in different strategies that we mentioned about how facilitators can really handle these meetings, make decisions when they're planning the agenda, take control of how to name what's going on, and maybe have strategies to really keep things moving forward in a positive manner. As you look at those strategies that she listed there in the chat, are there any ones you want to discuss or any examples anyone can share of those going on in your world?
I really like the one using different types of activities to give voices to others, because some people are not, vocal, but they could, write it down, their thoughts to share with the group.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. We'll take those down. You can definitely put these in your note catcher. Be thinking of other ways that you can share these with others on your team or others that may co-facilitate with you. And thank you for helping us bring all of those pieces together. All right, so why are we talking about this at all? Self-awareness, analysis of group members, that can improve our facilitation. Wow, it's interesting how all that happens. And so really when we think about those next steps and we think about the nuts and bolts of the meetings that we're going to be planning, having this foundational knowledge of self-awareness, who's in our group, what's the power in our group, how will we facilitate, will really help us put those pieces together in the next set of assignments and our next meeting that we have around planning our meetings. Okay, I'm going to share one last time to set us into the direction of moving forward. Okay, so next week, what are we going to talk about? First of all, Sarah and I have been so impressed, and Kayla, with the discussion board posts. Keep it up. We love it. You're learning from each other. It's excellent in terms of case studies and how we can really discuss examples. So keep that up. It's been a wonderful part of the course. And if you haven't had a chance, if you're one of those people that always responds first and then never goes back and looks, go back and look, because there's a lot of rich information in there. So other items before our next session, they include watching a short slideshow about meeting purpose, meeting design, designing an agenda, watch a slideshow on group agreements, do session 2, the blue, or it's not blue anymore. I don't think there's any color here. In your note catcher, you will look at, learning about yourself, considerations about power, dynamics. So just considering all of those pieces we've discussed today. Read through 2 scenarios we'll be using next week during breakout rooms so that you're familiar. And there's a link to provide feedback on today's session that you will receive, which, as you know now, we really do read those and get a lot of feedback to either make changes or help us consider what we can do differently next time. So I'm going to stop share and ask for any final thoughts, discussions, or questions that you might have. Sarah, do you have any other thoughts as we are moving into our 3rd session of this course?
The only thing I will say is to just reiterate what you said, Olivia, about reviewing those scenarios, because we are going to be talking through those next session. So make sure that you read through them prior to the session so that we can jump right into discussion about them. Great talking to everybody today. Thanks, everyone.
I have a quick logistical question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully my computer speaker microphone issue is resolved by the next session, but If not, will I be able to just call in the same number, use the same meeting ID to get in? Because I wasn't able to find that information posted in like an email calendar invite canvas or anything like that. I was able to get it today, but just wondering, like, will it be different next time or is it going to be the same, just in case I have really bad tech luck next time?
It'll be the same, Donnie. So if you, whatever you have for this one, you can use it for any of the recurring meetings.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
I copy it again.
Great question. And yes, everyone's had wonderful grace in technology. We know Zoom has had some issues recently, and we've all had our own, whatever that may be, tech issues. So thank you for asking those important questions. All right. Well, you're welcome to adjourn. Sarah and Kayla and I will stick around for any other questions or specific questions you have, and we'll be here. So thanks and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody.